Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. As Israel intensifies attacks on Beirut and prepares to strike Iran, the Gulf states have sent a message to the US. Stop Israel from attacking Iran's oil facilities. Needless to say, with rising tensions, oil prices are going up. Meanwhile, an Israeli attack on the UN peacekeepers in Lebanon is drawing a lot of criticism. And in Iran, top intelligence and military chiefs are under the scanner as the regime tries to purge Israeli spies from its ranks. Apparently, the chief of the Quds force is being interrogated. In other news, we'll tell you why Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address at the East Asia Summit is significant, why China has detained Foxconn workers without cause, why Bangladeshi students are marching with ISIS flags, and what is Mohammad Yunus doing about it? Another terror attack in Pakistan, is it capable of ensuring the safety of the SCO summit next week? Why Donald Trump keeps bringing up Indian tariffs in his election campaign? How Hungary's leader Viktor Orban got a hostile reception at the EU Parliament, and why Chinese zoos are artificially fattening animals to go viral. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Is the European Union and China on the verge of a full-blown trade war? The EU chief warns Beijing, says it must adapt its behavior to avoid an escalation. China and the 27-member bloc are at odds over Beijing's subsidies for its industries. Brussels says it unfairly undercuts European competitors. The Ukrainian president meets Pope Francis at the Vatican. It's part of Volodymyr Zelensky's whirlwind tour of Europe as he looks to drum up support from allies ahead of a tough winter. Zelensky's 48-hour trip includes London, Paris, Rome and Berlin. Bangladesh accuses Myanmar's navy of firing on its fishing boats after they strayed into Myanmar's territorial waters. Dhaka says one person has been killed and more than 50 people have been detained by Myanmar. Border issues have been a constant source of tension between the two neighbors. Noel Tata appointed the new chairman of Tata Trust. He succeeds his half-brother Ratan Tata, who passed away on Wednesday. Noel Tata was unanimously elected. The 67-year-old has previously held various leadership positions within the Tata Group. And a Japanese anti-nuclear group wins the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a grassroots movement of atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were honored for their efforts to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. We start with the latest from West Asia, where the focus is on Lebanon. Its capital, Beirut, looks like a war zone. The sky is full of black smoke, sounds of explosions fill the air, and rubble is piling up on the streets. Last night, Israel struck Beirut again. It was their deadliest airstrike yet. Yesterday's attack alone killed at least 22 people. More than 100 others are injured. Israel hit central Beirut. It's a part of the city that was not targeted before. This area is packed with civilians with multiple apartments, and this is where Israeli forces struck without a warning. Who were they after? A man called Wafik Safa. He's a senior Hezbollah leader. Wafik Safa was a close ally of Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah was killed by Israel last month. Safa was one of his main negotiators, which makes him an important target for Israel, and that's why they wanted to kill him. But they failed. Wafik Safa managed to survive the strike, but some of the locals around him were not so lucky. Eyewitnesses say Israel carried out a devastating strike.
Who helped you? Did you go to the hospital, or did someone in the street help?
Someone on the street from the guys. I thought I was not going to survive.
What happened?
People have been humiliated. They have been. What can they do?
The situation in southern Lebanon is even worse. This is where Israel says it is hitting Hezbollah bases. To justify their operation, the Israeli Defense Forces have also released a video. It shows their spokesperson giving a tour of the house. Israel says that this was a Hezbollah base, where its fighters stored guns and grenades. Take a look at this.
Every house is a terror base. I wanted you to see in your own eyes what we found here today. This is our forces raiding on this village. Come with me. All of these weapons here were stored and piled in the house, ready for the big raid. You see the hand grenades here? Sniper rifles, extremely high sniper rifles, shooting on our forces, shooting on our civilians from far away. Look at those sniper rifles here.
The video is indeed quite dramatic. Critics say that this is part of the Israeli information war. In the early days of the Gaza war, videos like these were quite common. The IDF used to release them frequently. They were presented as proof of threat and the enemy's nefarious designs, and they were meant to justify Israel's military actions. Now, the same strategy is being deployed in Lebanon. The exact location of this Hezbollah base is not clear. Also, we don't know when the video was shot. Israel has not shared a lot of specifics, but it's made its intent amply clear. The IDF will escalate this war, and this has alarmed the region, especially the Gulf states. They are worried about Israel's next moves with respect to Iran. This week, Israel issued fresh threats. Remember, we told you about this. They said that they will retaliate and that the strike would be deadly, precise, and surprising. These were the exact words of the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. And they seem to have triggered more panic. The Gulf states are lobbying the United States. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. They want to avoid further escalation, and they want Washington to intervene to stop Israel from targeting Iranian oil sites. What is it that prompted this appeal? A threat from Tehran. It said that any Gulf assistance to Israel would be seen as an act of war. This includes opening up their airspace for any Israeli operation. Iran has delivered this message to the Saudis and drawn clear red lines with this warning. It is basically telling the Gulf states that if Israel attacks us, we will go after your oil facilities. You see, in the event of an all-out war, the Americans are expected to support Israel. And the Americans have military bases all over the Gulf. So Iran sees them as fair game. It's a scenario that Gulf countries want to avoid. The oil market is already feeling nervous. Prices of Brent crude have been volatile this week. Sweeping attacks on oil facilities will mean a sharp jump in oil prices. So these Gulf countries want America to stop Israel. But at this point, even the US seems helpless. Consider what Antony Blinken said today.
So Israel has a clear and very legitimate interest in doing that. The people of Lebanon want the same thing. We believe that the best way to get there is through a diplomatic understanding, one that we've been working on for some time and one that we're extremely focused on right now.
That's the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He sounds completely out of touch with the ground reality. He keeps talking about a diplomatic solution. But for that, Israel will have to end its operations, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. And Netanyahu has shown no inclination to do that. In fact, he has opened up another front in this war. Israel seems to be going after the United Nations now. So the war in Lebanon continues, and stuck in the middle are United Nations Peacekeepers, a force called UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Peacekeeping Force in Lebanon. That's UNIFIL. They say that Israel is attacking them. The latest incident was on Thursday. UNIFIL says Israeli tanks fired at their observation post. 2 Indonesian peacekeepers were injured. And this is not a one-off. UNIFIL has listed out 2 other incidents. On Wednesday, Israel fired at their cameras. These cameras are used to monitor the peacekeeping perimeter, and Israel disabled them. After that, they fired at a bunker used by the peacekeepers. Some vehicles and communication systems were damaged. That's 3 attacks in 48 hours. So it looks like UNIFIL has had enough. They issued a reminder to Israeli forces. Any attack on peacekeepers is a violation of humanitarian law. That's what they said, and the world obviously is not happy with this. Indonesia, Turkey, the European Union, Canada, all of them have criticized this attack. And leading the charge here is Italy. Around 800 of their soldiers are part of this peacekeeping force. So Rome is livid. Their defense minister says the attacks could be a war crime.
The hostile acts carried out and reiterated by Israeli forces against the UNP 131 base could constitute a war crime and certainly constitute very serious violations of the norms of international humanitarian law, certainly violations not justified by any military necessity.
Italy has summoned the Israeli ambassador. They've also lodged a formal protest. And this is a problem for Israel because Italy has backed Netanyahu throughout this war a lot more than France and Germany. The Italians have backed him. But an attack on peacekeepers is unacceptable. That too a deliberate one. So how is Israel defending itself? Well, they haven't reacted yet, but in the past, Israel has been critical of UNIFIL. They say that it has failed its mandate.
For years, Israel has warned the world that Hezbollah is violating international law and United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which prohibits the presence of armed militants and weapons in southern Lebanon. This was a resolution that the international community agreed on, and Lebanon and UNIFIL failed to enforce.
Some background now. UNIFIL was created back in 1978. At first, its job was to observe, to see if Israel had completely withdrawn from Lebanon. The UNIFIL has more than 10,000 personnel now. That's soldiers plus civilians. They operate along what is called the Blue Line. It's a 120-kilometer stretch on the Israel-Lebanon border, the Blue Line. In 2006, the United Nations added more teeth to UNIFIL. Its mandate was expanded. The peacekeepers were asked to ensure that the border remained stable, that it wasn't used for hostilities. But frankly, it hasn't worked. Israel and the US claim that Hezbollah has militarized the Blue Line, that they fire rockets from the border. So what is Israel doing now? They're asking the peacekeepers to move away, basically to abandon their posts. If not, they could be in danger. Of course, that's not Israel's decision to make. These peacekeepers were deployed by the United Nations. They are mandated by the United Nations Security Council. So UNIFIL says, we are staying where we are.
There was an agreement with all the troop contributing countries that it's important for the UN to be there, to fly the UN flag, and we continue to monitor the situation. We are there because the Security Council has asked us to be there. So we are staying until the situation becomes impossible for us to operate.
Now, Israel's goal is quite clear. They're not trying to kill the peacekeepers. They're only trying to scare them, to force them to leave their mission. It seems to be a change in strategy because in Gaza, Israel did not seem to care. They have killed more than 200 United Nations staff in Gaza. So why the different strategy in Lebanon? Because these are foreign soldiers, soldiers contributed by United Nations member countries. Just look at this data. Indonesia has more than 1,200 personnel in Lebanon. At second place is India. Nearly 900 Indian soldiers are stationed there. You have troops from Nepal, from Ghana, from Malaysia, from Spain, from China, from Ireland, from nearly 50 countries in total. 2 of these peacekeepers have already been injured. What if the next attack is worse? Imagine the consequences. So Israel is trying to cover its bases. It is forcing UNIFIL to pull back voluntarily. The next steps depend on the United Nations Security Council and the contributing countries, the 50 countries. Will they bend to Israel's pressure or will they push back? And this is a question for India too. The safety of Indian soldiers must be New Delhi's top priority. This is a chance for the international community to draw a rare red line, a line that is actually enforceable. Let's see if they do it.
هر کجا لازم باشه مخصوصاً
Now let's turn to Israel's primary rival, that is Iran. Iran has been reeling over the past few weeks. Israel has been decimating Tehran's allies, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, Nasrallah's potential successor Hashim Safiuddin. Israel has taken them out one by one. This was bound to send alarm bells ringing in Tehran because Iran has spent years setting up its network of proxies, and Israel took out their leaders in quick succession. This has also raised questions. Does Israel have spies in Iran's top military force? Is that how they're being able to zero in on these leaders and kill them? The Iranian force in question here is the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It is a military with multiple branches. They have their own army, a navy, and a rocket force. But in the fight against Israel, their most deadly unit is the Quds Force. It is the IRGC's unconventional warfare and military intelligence unit. The Quds Force is led by this man, Ismail Ghani. You mentioned him earlier this week. There were rumors that he had gone missing. But now some different rumors are doing the rounds, saying that Ghani is not missing. Instead, he is being interrogated. Tehran thinks that there is a chance that Ghani is an Israeli spy. Let that sink in. Ismail Ghani, the head of the Quds Force, the man responsible for organizing all of Iran's proxies, that man might be an Israeli spy. Let's look at the timeline of events to see why Ghani might be under investigation. We start with the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the chief of Hamas. Haniyeh was killed on the 31st of July this year in Tehran, in the Iranian capital. He was killed at a guest house that was reportedly secured by the IRGC. Iran has not confirmed the exact method of killing yet, but one version is that a bomb had been planted in that guest house. And that does not paint the IRGC in a good light. Did they not check for bombs before housing such an important guest? So that was strike one. Strike two was the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah. Nasrallah was killed on the 27th of September at the Hezbollah headquarters in Lebanon's capital, Beirut. How did Israel know where to strike? Could it have anything to do with Iran? With IRGC Brigadier General Abbas Nilforushan. He was killed along with Nasrallah, but some interesting details have now come out. Nilforushan was a member of the Quds Force. He was overseeing operations in Syria and Lebanon. He took over these duties in the month of April, after his predecessor was killed in an Israeli airstrike. So an Israeli attack led to Nilforushan's promotion. Fast forward a few months to September 27th, Nilforushan flies into Beirut that day, on the 27th. Reports say that Nasrallah had stepped away from the Hezbollah headquarters. But then he went back to meet Nilforushan. They met at the Hezbollah headquarters, and that is when Israel struck. It's quite the coincidence. So the IRGC was involved in both Haniyeh and Nasrallah's assassinations. But that still doesn't mean that the Quds chief Ghani was a spy. He should have still been above suspicion. But then the next attack took place, the assassination of Hashim Safiuddin, Nasrallah's heir apparent. And this time, the Quds chief was said to be directly involved. Ghani flew down to Beirut after Nasrallah's assassination. He reportedly arrived there on the 29th of September to assess the situation on the ground. He was apparently in touch with Safiuddin, and he was invited to a Hezbollah senior leadership meeting on the 3rd of October. Now, reports say that Ghani cancelled at the last minute, and Israel later bombed that very meeting. Ghani has been under the radar ever since. Initially, there were rumors that he had been killed as well, but on Monday, Iran said that he was in good health. Ghani has not been seen in public, but an alleged photo of him from last Sunday has been doing the rounds. Ghani is seen here with Abdullah Safiuddin, Hashim Safiuddin's brother. This meeting reportedly took place in Tehran, so it seems that the Quds Force chief returned to Iran over the weekend. Now, here is what we know. 3 major Iranian proxy leaders are dead. The IRGC is linked to all 3 assassinations. The Quds Force, in particular, may have had ties to the last 2, and their chief was back in Iran. And this is where things get murky. On Monday, Ghani's deputy says that he is in good health. carrying on with his duties. On Wednesday, Ghani's aide makes a bold claim. He says that Ghani is about to get a medal from Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And then yesterday, we see reports about Ghani being interrogated and suffering a heart attack during questioning. Yes, that's the most recent rumor, that Ghani had a heart attack during interrogation. We are sure to hear more rumors soon, official denials, secret sources confirming it, the works. We don't know what Ghani's fate will be, but we know one thing. Israel has succeeded in eroding the trust within Iran's establishment. No one is above suspicion anymore, and a hunt is on to find Israeli moles. Iran will need time to get its house back in order, and Israel will definitely take advantage of that. Now let's look at what India has been up to. Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrapped up 2 hectic days of diplomacy. He was in the Southeast Asian nation of Laos to attend 2 key summits. Yesterday, we told you about the India-ASEAN summit, about India's cooperation with the bloc. Today, Prime Minister Modi was at a broader forum, the East Asia Summit.
The East Asia Summit. It's a summit of the 10 ASEAN nations, along with 8 others. India is one of them, of course. Then you have the US and its allies, and Russia and China. As you can see, it's a diverse group, and it has the potential for conflict. So it's a good thing that India was there to calm things down. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the first to speak after the host nation, and he reiterated India's take on global problems. He said, "The conflicts going on in different parts of the world are having the most negative impact on the countries of the global south. Everyone wants that, whether it's Eurasia or West Asia, peace and stability should be restored as soon as possible. I come from the land of Buddha, and I have repeatedly said that this is not the era of war. Solutions to problems cannot come from the battlefield." Prime Minister Modi believes that war is not the solution. He continues to call for peace. And hopefully his words will sink in one of these days. One more thing of note was how he highlighted the global south. He pointed out that the wars have had a negative impact, and the brunt has been borne disproportionately by the global south. Despite the region having no role to play in the fighting, it has been hammered economically. It is collateral damage. India is in a unique position, though. It's a fast-growing economy with a massive population. So India has heft at global forums, which is why Prime Minister Modi always calls for an end of wars. It's India's way of trying to be the voice of the global south and raising our issues at the global stage. Hopefully, the belligerent forces around us will listen. But while waiting for reason to kick in, India's Prime Minister kept himself busy with other matters. After the East Asia Summit speech, he proceeded to hold bilateral meetings. Modi met with New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. They discussed a potential free trade agreement between the two countries. Luxon said that he's hopeful that such a deal could manifest in the next 2 years. After that, Modi spoke to the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and Thailand's new Prime Minister, Paetongtarn Shinawatra. Again, expanding trade was on the agenda. Then came the main bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and his Laotian counterpart, Prime Minister Sonsai Siphandone. Remember, Laos was the host country for this East Asia Summit, so of course a major bilateral was part of the agenda. India and Laos signed multiple MOUs on defense cooperation, customs, broadcasting, and some smaller cultural projects. India has agreed to provide about $150,000 to Laos to preserve temples and murals, and about $1 million to boost food security. Before leaving, Prime Minister Modi gifted some handicrafts to all the leaders he met, a way to showcase Indian craftsmanship. All in all, it was a successful trip for the Indian Prime Minister to Laos.
Now let's shift our focus to China. A new controversy has erupted involving Foxconn. It is the world's largest assembler of iPhones. Chinese authorities have detained 4 Foxconn employees. They worked in the company's Zhengzhou plant. And what are the charges? Well, local authorities are silent over these arrests. Taiwan's government has criticized the move. It has termed these detentions as quite strange. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, but most of its manufacturing happens in China. Tensions between China and Taiwan have been growing for a while, and it appears that Foxconn is now caught in the crossfire. Here's a report.
In China, it's dangerous to get too rich. This argument was made by a piece in the Financial Times. It created quite a stir. It showed how famed Chinese billionaires like Jack Ma and Colin Huang found themselves in the crosshairs of Chinese law enforcement. In Xi Jinping's China, businesses have a target on their back. And the latest victim is Foxconn. Yes, the company that makes iPhones for Apple. 4 employees of Foxconn are in detention. Reports say these workers are Taiwanese, but they worked in China's Zhengzhou, where Foxconn has one of its biggest plants. The arrests appear to be suspect. The charges against these employees are a bit vague, like misappropriation of funds and breach of trust. But Foxconn says these workers did nothing wrong. Foxconn suffered no losses. Neither were any of its interests harmed. Then why are these employees arrested? Taiwan has already termed these arrests as strange. But this crackdown fits a pattern. Several Taiwanese workers have gone missing in China this year. Since January, at least 77 such incidents have been reported. Often these victims end up facing charges of fraud, and the fate of these cases remains unknown. But Taipei has been increasingly expressing concerns. Taiwan's government has issued a series of warnings advising all Taiwanese people to not travel to the mainland. Just like Foxconn, several Taiwanese businesses depend on the mainland. They have significant business interests in China, and they often pick professionals from Taiwan to run the business operations in the mainland. Any other country would view foreign workers as assets, but increasingly, China views these professionals as threats. Under Xi Jinping's watch, Chinese authorities have launched a sweeping crackdown on foreign businesses. The reason? National security. Taiwanese workers are easy targets in China. Beijing claims Taiwan is not an independent territory, but part of China. It views supporters of Taiwan's independence as separatists. Beijing has even threatened to execute them. But it's not just the Taiwanese. Since last year, Chinese officials have raided a number of foreign firms. Again, they invoked vague Chinese laws for this. Most accusations revolve around data, intellectual property, and of course, national security. This can't just be a coincidence. Foreign businesses should see the writing on the wall as it becomes increasingly unsafe to operate in China.
Let's turn to Bangladesh now. It's been more than 2 months since Sheikh Hasina was toppled, since the so-called Dhaka Spring. And what are they doing with this newfound freedom? Well, see for yourself. Those were Bangladeshi college students. And did you see their flag? It looks very much like the flag of the Islamic State, a black background with white font. But why are these students flaunting an ISIS flag? And why are they marching? Well, first of all, we must tell you that these are not just another bunch of students. They come from elite Dhaka colleges, like St. Joseph College, Notre Dame College, Dhaka College, Cantonment College. Some of these are rated A+ by the Bangladesh government. And why are they marching? Well, one reason is a controversy in India. The students say that a Hindu monk insulted Prophet Muhammad, so they're demanding action. Some students are also protesting Bangladeshi laws. Why? Apparently because they're anti-Muslim. But these are just excuses, really. Because most of these student protesters had one overarching demand: to set up an Islamic caliphate in Bangladesh. You heard that right, an Islamic caliphate, like the ISIS tried in West Asia. They want it in Bangladesh. And who is leading this movement? Dhaka's police chief is blaming a group called Hizb ut-Tahrir. Now, this is a global terrorist group. It was formed in Jerusalem way back in 1953, and its objective to establish a caliphate across the world, even in places like India. Bangladesh had banned this group in 2009, but now they're looking for a way back in. The Hizb ut-Tahrir leader has appealed to Muhammad Yunus, the interim leader of Bangladesh. He wants Yunus to lift the ban on his group. But will Yunus do it? Well, he did lift the ban on the Jamaat-e-Islami. He released a lot of terror accused from jail. Plus, one of his aides is linked to this group, a student leader named Mehfouz Alam. Reports say he has ties to the Hizb ut-Tahrir. If true, the signals are not good, and this will worry India. On Thursday, New Delhi banned this group. It's been declared a terror organization by the Indian government. Perhaps India fears a resurgence, a comeback of the Hizb ut-Tahrir. So let's take a closer look at their plans. The Hizb ut-Tahrir has been trying to infiltrate Bangladesh's army, and they've had some success. In 2011, there was a coup attempt in Dhaka. The army arrested 15 of its officers. In their statement, they blamed Hizb ut-Tahrir. Apparently, the coup was plotted to install a caliphate. What does that tell you? That despite the ban, they had enough clout. Even these student protests are an example of that. And it's an alarming trajectory. The only solution is a crackdown. You cannot let such movements grow. It's not freedom of expression or assembly. It is promoting terrorism. So Muhammad Yunus must put his foot down. He must nip this ideology in the bud. And to be fair, we have seen some indications of that. Some attempts, at least. After Sheikh Hasina's ouster, the Hizb ut-Tahrir started organizing rallies. Immediately, the cops went after them. Even now, 10 people have been arrested. But it's far from enough. You must fight the ideology as well. Yunus has been willing to cede space to Islamists. He has downplayed attacks on minorities, especially the Hindus of Bangladesh. And such moves encourage radical elements. They feel like they can get away with anything. Just consider what happened at a Hindu temple in Satkhira. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had visited this temple in 2021. During that visit, he gifted a crown for the idol. But now that crown has been stolen. The Indian High Commission is concerned about this development. It is asking local authorities to track down the crown. Let's see how proactive that investigation will be, and whether Bangladesh's leadership condemns such actions. Pakistan is all set to host the SCO summit. That's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This summit will take place in Islamabad on the 16th and 17th of this month. Heads of state will be in attendance. Indian Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar will also be there. But is Pakistan equipped to handle a summit of this scale? I ask because yesterday another terror attack took place in the country. 20 minors were killed in Balochistan, 8 others were injured. No group has claimed responsibility yet, but this is the second attack in Pakistan in just a week, which brings us back to the questions. Can Pakistan assure the safety of the SCO summit, and what sort of security measures are they taking? Our next report tells you.
The attack took place on Thursday night. The location was a coal mine in Balochistan's Duki district. A few gunmen stormed the accommodation where the miners were living. They gathered them in one place and started to open fire. 20 people were killed. 3 of them were Afghan nationals. At least 8 others were injured. They remain in a critical condition. No group has yet claimed responsibility for this, but this isn't the first such attack in Pakistan. Earlier this week, 2 Chinese nationals were killed in a bombing near Karachi's international airport. The Baloch Liberation Army was behind that. So, 2 attacks in just 1 week. It's concerning for Islamabad, especially given the timing. Pakistan is all set to host the SCO summit on the 16th and 17th of October in Islamabad. SCO is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India, too, is a member of this group. Pakistan had invited Prime Minister Modi to the summit, but the Indian Prime Minister isn't going. Instead, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar will attend on the 15th of October. This is the first time an Indian foreign minister is visiting Pakistan in 9 years. The last was Sushma Swaraj in 2015. Other heads of state will also be in attendance, including the Chinese premier. So Islamabad has had to get its act together. It cannot let terror cast a shadow over the summit. So Pakistan is taking some drastic security measures. For 5 days, starting tomorrow till the 16th of October, all restaurants, cafes, wedding halls and other clubs will be closed, both in Rawalpindi and Islamabad. All cash and carry marts will also be closed in Islamabad. As part of the extensive security measures, commandos and sniper shooters will be deployed on the rooftops of all multi-story buildings in the capital as well. Not just that, suspects will not be presented in court for 5 days. Courts are also rescheduling hearings. They will only take place after the summit. Reports suggest that there's also a ban on pigeon and kite flying. Authorities have even demolished pigeon nets present on the tops of buildings and other establishments. The government has also declared a holiday in the twin cities of Islamabad and Rawalpindi. All education institutions and government offices will be closed. This is to ensure a smooth preparation for the summit. So Pakistan is pulling out all the stops, but can it ensure a safe SCO summit? Terror attacks in the country have shot up since 2023. Last year, 1,523 people were killed in terror attacks in Pakistan. This year, the number is already at 1,534. The latest terror attack is an indication of that, and it raises doubts over the safety of the high-profile meeting.
Donald Trump is at it again. He's dragging India into his election campaign. And as always with Trump, it's a mixed bag. Sometimes he's all praises, sometimes he's insulting. We have seen both recently. The former president appeared on a podcast this week. He was asked about his equation with world leaders, and Trump zoned in on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He even mimicked the Prime Minister. Listen to this.
He's the nicest human being. But we had a couple of occasions where somebody was threatening India. I said, let me help. I'm very good with those people. Let me help. I will do it. I will do it. And I will do anything necessary. We've defeated them for hundreds of years.
Like I said, all praises. He called the Prime Minister of India a great friend, someone who will do anything to defend India. Cut to Thursday, Trump was in Detroit. This time he was criticizing India. He called India the biggest charger of tariffs, even bigger than China.
A 200% tariff. Brazil is a big charger. The biggest charger of all is India. India is a very big charger. They probably charge as much. I mean, I think they probably charge more than, in many ways, China. But they do it with a smile, you know, they do it.
A couple of things to note here. First is the policy bit. Trump is promising tit-for-tat tariffs. Suppose India charges 50% on whiskey imported from the US, then America will hike its tariffs too. That is what Trump is promising. Secondly, the political bit. We often dismiss Trump's remarks as Trump being Trump. But beyond a point, it's not funny. In 2020, he called India tariff king. Last month, he called India an abuser of tariffs. This is coming from a former US president, possibly the next US president too. So such comments can affect perceptions about India. It can harm India's trade prospects. And beyond that, it's simply not true. Trump likes to paint the world as black and white, but this issue is more complicated. If you look at the average tariffs, he's right. India's average is 17%. America charges just 3.3%. South Korea is 13%. China is 7.5%. But these numbers hide a lot of nuances. Take tobacco, for instance. The US charges 350% tariff on certain types of tobacco and 100% on European chocolate and cheese. Is that not tariff abuse? Another example is Japan. They charge, and listen to this, 778% tariff on imported rice. Why? To protect their own rice farmers. Is that not tariff abuse? The fact is, India is simply looking out for itself. New Delhi says all tariffs are within limits set by the World Trade Organization. What's more, India has signed multiple FTAs. That's free trade agreements. These are deals to eliminate or lower tariffs. India has signed 14 FTAs since independence. And the US? Exactly the same, 14. Does that sound like a tariff abuser or a tariff king? You see, these are sensitive issues, topics that must be handled with mature diplomacy. But Trump is doing the opposite. He goes public first, puts pressure on the other side, and if it doesn't work, he threatens them. In a nutshell, that is Trump's diplomacy. So if he wins, what does it mean for India? Well, not a lot will change. Trump has promised to raise tariffs on imports, in some cases to 100%, but India's economy is mostly dependent on the domestic demand. Exports make up just 13% of our GDP. In China, they make up 25%. So India won't be as affected as others. But there's a larger point to be made here. We don't need Donald Trump or any foreign leader to validate India's credentials, whether it's on trade or foreign policy or defense. He is a politician at the end of the day. He will praise India on Monday and trash India on Wednesday. Both should not affect us as a country. We can fact-check his claims, we can criticize his opinion, but we can't hold on to his words as the gospel truth. That's the hallmark of a confident society. Our next story is from the European Parliament, where Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban got a hostile reception. You see, the European Union has a rotating presidency. Hungary is the current president, so Orban was addressing the bloc's parliament. The speech started out as normal, but the more he spoke, the more he seemed to have enraged lawmakers. By the time he finished, many started singing Bella Ciao. It's a classic anti-fascist anthem. And with this, the session, in fact, turned into a standoff. On one side was the Hungarian Prime Minister, on the other were a bunch of EU lawmakers wanting him to get out. Our next report brings you the details.
In the halls of European democracy, a confrontation unfolded like no other. A clash between Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the lawmakers of the European Union. A clash of ideologies, words and even music. For years, Viktor Orban has taken swipes at the European Union. He's criticized the bloc, he's hit out at the lawmakers, but on Thursday, he got a taste of his own medicine. Hungary currently holds the presidency of the European Union, so Orban was addressing the parliament. He began by presenting the priorities of Hungary's norm-defying presidency. He depicted a continent in turmoil. He talked about the Ukraine war at Europe's doorstep and also talked about the migration crisis.
Several of you are protesting against what I'm saying, but I would like to say that the facts speak for themselves. In Europe, illegal migration is increasing anti-Semitism, violence against women, and homophobia. Now, you may not like it, but these are the facts.
Of course, the European Union wouldn't have any of it. So the lawmakers responded not with words, but with a song. Bella Ciao, an Italian anti-fascist resistance anthem from World War II. Their message was clear. The European Parliament was taking a defiant stand against Orban's rhetoric.
You are representing. Your trip was never a peace mission. It was a big propaganda show for the autocrats and those who are defining our European way of life. Your trip was not a peace mission. Your trip was never a peace mission, it was a war prolongation mission. That is what we speak about.
The European Parliament president tried to shut them down, but even that didn't work.
Then, but this is not the Eurovision. Let's respect the dignity of this House. Please, President.
Orban's right-wing nationalist stance has long been at odds with the European Union. From his alliances with leaders like Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping to his outspoken support for former US President Donald Trump, Orban's moves have raised concerns across Europe. His presence at the helm of the EU presidency further complicates the bloc's diplomatic strategy. So much so that even European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had to speak up.
The world has witnessed the atrocities of Russia's war. And yet, there are still some who blame this war not on the invader, but the invaded, not on Putin's. There are still some who blame this war not on Putin's lust for power, but on Ukraine's thirst for freedom.
It wasn't the first time the European Parliament turned to song. In January 2020, they sang Auld Lang Syne. It was to mark Britain's departure from the bloc. But this time, the melody of resistance carried a different tune. As Viktor Orban calls to make Europe great again, the battle for the soul of Europe continues, where the songs of the past echo into present-day politics.
Our last story tonight comes from China, which is mired in another zoo controversy. A Chinese zoo is being accused of mistreating animals, including a leopard, a bear, a peacock, and an alpaca, by intentionally fattening them. Why? To attain international stardom, apparently. China has been accused of trying to create the next viral sensation like Thailand's Mu Deng, the chubby, tiny pygmy hippo. So just as the animals started gaining attention, the Chinese zoo hiked its ticket prices by 50%. Now, of course, it has denied all allegations, saying that the animals simply have loose skin. Here's a report.
Once an agile leopard, now rolling on its back and having difficulty walking. The bear, supposedly a fearsome killer, now frequently found in a state of food coma with crumbs on its chest. And this resplendent peacock, now as big as a turkey. These animals are residents of a zoo in China, the Panzihua Park Zoo in the Sichuan province, and they have started attaining international fame, but for the wrong reasons. The zoo has been accused of overfeeding its animals and fattening them up to turn them into viral sensations like Mu Deng. Unless you live under a rock, you must have heard of Mu Deng. She is Thailand's latest internet celebrity, who has attained global fame. She has millions of followers on social media. Mu Deng is a pygmy hippo. That's the world's smallest species of hippo. They are known for their tiny stature. So Mu Deng is not only young and small, she's also plump and adorable. Her chubby cheeks have spurred makeup trends and memes. So it's not surprising that a Chinese zoo would want to attract a similar frenzy of attention. If this is true, it would just be China being China, fueled by the spirit of unhealthy competition, quite literally. Visitors have widely shared pictures of these fattening animals, from tubby leopard to chonky bears, ostriches and alpacas. The zoo has been accused of intentionally beefing up its animals and mistreating them by keeping them in small enclosures and not giving them enough exercise. While these are merely allegations, according to local reports, as soon as the animals began gaining attention on social media, more visitors began turning up, and the zoo hiked its ticket prices by 50%. Now, the zoo has responded to the allegations. They say the animals are merely healthy, and some of them simply have loose skin. Now, how does one argue with that excuse? Only Chinese scientists may be able to explain how peacocks get so much loose skin that they're dubbed turkeys. This incident is raising eyebrows. After all, China's zoos don't have a great track record. Zoogoers have repeatedly been left outraged in the country after zoos painted dogs and paraded them as pandas. When people realized that the so-called pandas they were obsessing over were barking and panting, Chinese zoos came up with the excuses, calling the animals a special breed of panda dogs. But as the outrage grew, they finally admitted to dyeing furry dogs and giving them black patches so they resembled pandas. There was quite a pandemonium, pardon the pun. And now, Chinese zoos seem to be back with bigger, fatter lies.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Dancing Optimus robots take over the stage at Elon Musk's Tesla event. Larry the Cat upstages Ukrainian President Zelensky during his welcome at 10 Downing Street. And northern lights color the skies on both sides of the Atlantic. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 2008, Kashmir got its first ever train service. The inaugural train was flagged off from near Srinagar. It was part of a rail link that connected the valley to the rest of India. The project was initially launched in 1998 with much fanfare, but it took over 10 years to complete. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.